so much to the BAPM team, Andrea, and everybody associated for having me here today to talk about, at least to share my experience on stakeholder engagement from an Agile perspective. So I'd like to do just a brief introduction of myself. My name is Tyrhonda Knowles-Glinton, as indicated earlier, and I'll just present my screen. So my name is Tyrhonda Knowles-Glinton. I am a project manager / business analyst with the IDB and also with the government of the Bahamas, and I'll explain further later on. Currently working on a project called My Gateway, which is the Bahamas's first interoperability platform that will allow government services to be accessed online. The whole purpose is to allow Bahamian citizens and residents to be able to access government services, like I said, in a seamless manner. So essentially that it is like I said, the first of its kind, and I'm a part of that project team. So with that being said, I'm gonna move on. As my screen displays, we're talking about stakeholder management, identifying key players in a project. And I'm going to talk more from an Agile perspective, considering that is the environment that we work from at the unit that I'm working with. So we're just going to go over a little things such as the introduction, which I already did, stakeholder management definitions, types of stakeholders, stakeholder mapping, and next steps. So what is a stakeholder? And as you may be aware, a stakeholder is a group, a person or organization that has interests or concerns in an organization. And stakeholders can affect or be affected by the organization's actions, objectives, and policies. For us, especially in the IT arena, project managers and business analysts, specifically in the role that I am operating in, we realize that stakeholders are important for the delivery of our IT-based projects. And I'm certain it is the same for any project that anybody undertakes. Engaging the wrong stakeholder for the wrong reason can definitely be an issue. And 1 second, let's make sure. Are you seeing my presentation screen, or are you seeing the presentation itself? I just want to make sure.
We're seeing both the presentation and then the slides on the bottom.
Okay. All right. Just making sure you're not seeing my notes. All right. So like I said, essentially for us as project managers in the IT space, we understand that engaging the right people, the right groups at the right time is very, very important. All right. And this definition was taken from investorsexcellence.com. So essentially, as you may be aware, a stakeholder is anybody who has interest or concern in the project and or organization that you're assigned to at a particular time. So what is stakeholder management, right? So I'll refer to the PMBOK definition. And in the PMBOK, they don't necessarily outline what stakeholder management is. It more so focuses on stakeholder engagement. But stakeholder management is the process in which you organize, monitor, and improve your relationship with your stakeholders. And in the PMBOK, this particular phase is found in the initiation underneath the project charter of that phase. And it's so important that it was included first inside the project charter. Besides the scope and all those other things, it's included in the first phase, which is at the project initiation. And as you can see, this would fall underneath the category that says identify stakeholders, and you would have a number of inputs that goes along with identifying those stakeholders. You also have a number of tools and techniques, and this is more focused on the older approach. However, this is still applicable for Agile project management. Now, if you refer to the Scrum guide, you'll be surprised that there's not too much reference to stakeholders or stakeholder management inside of that Scrum guide. However, there is mentioned about 6 times. And essentially it states that the Scrum team and stakeholders collaborate. That information concerning the progress to the goal is made transparent to all stakeholders. And in the sprint review, the participants include the Scrum team, key stakeholders that is invited by the product owner who has purview over the stakeholders. So, like I said, earlier I made reference to the previous version of, or the waterfall version of initiating a project. And in that particular process is underneath the identify stakeholders. However, in the Scrum guide, made very little reference to stakeholder management, but it does make reference to identifying and or stakeholders and when they should be engaged.
Hey,
Hi, Tyrhonda.
Tyrhonda was
Hi.
in your notes.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
why I was asking earlier. Okay, one second, let me stop sharing my screen. And I just use it as a point of reference because I know I get rumbled. So let me go back here. So there are 2 types of stakeholders that exist. We have the primary stakeholders or the internal stakeholders. And these people have a direct relationship with your organization. And they form the core of your organization's activities. Their level of involvement is high so that their influence in your organization their influence in your organization as well as their activities. For us, inside of our project, it's very important for us to identify both the internal and we call them the key and the external stakeholders, and I'll explain a little bit more after I go through the external stakeholders. But it's very important that you identify and classify those types of stakeholders, because you will soon learn that based on those classifications, you must engage them in different ways. And then one second, and then with the external stakeholders, you have an indirect relationship. They have an indirect relationship with your organization. Their level of involvement is low, and so is their level of influence. So some people you would find as a part of your primary and internal stakeholders would be like your project managers, your Scrum team, which includes the product owner, the developers, your sponsor, all of those key members. And the external stakeholders would be like the suppliers or the vendors, let's say the public, and any external organization that has some influence, like I said, or stake into the project. And I'll give you an example for us. In one particular instance, and I can speak about this because I guess the service is already launched. When we launched the Department of Labor certificate service, we identified that internally, our stakeholders would be obviously the agency and its customers, and the other agency. So for example, the Department of Labor, but we also identified another key stakeholder that is external to Department of Labor, but still an internal customer as Department of Immigration, because the labor certificate is used as an output document from the Department of Labor, but it's used as an input document for the Immigration Department. So during those engagements, after we got to the point of developing the application, we had to engage Immigration Department to inform them of the change of how this certificate will look, and to get acceptance from them in order for them to accept it as a input document for their agency. So identifying those stakeholders is very important, because in the event, for example, using that same example, we did not involve immigration and we launched this service with the Department of Labor. When those customers presented that labor certificate to the Department of Immigration, most likely they would have been rejected because they were not informed. And so it's important to identify those persons at the early onset and engage them at different times if possible. Or at the same time, depends on the nature of where they're involved. So like I said, those are some of the examples. So the stakeholder management process, generally speaking, is the same for the older version. I always say older, it's still being used, but the waterfall method versus the agile method or the predictive method, because the process itself still aligned. So the first is identifying and analyzing stakeholders. So essentially, you have to identify who these stakeholders are. Once you identify them, analyzing them includes where do they fall in line of your matrix. And I'll go into the matrix in the next slide. So do they have high power? Do they have heavy influence? And is their level of interest high or low? What is their level of interest? Because all of those factors come into play, and it also determines how you engage them. The next is also prioritizing your stakeholders. Once you identify and you analyze them, you prioritize them, knowing how to say that this person is first of all, if they're the project sponsor, we meet with them first. These are the people we engage early on. We keep them happy, we keep them satisfied. These are the middle management team. And even from my personal experience, what I realized too, sometimes the people of high power and influence are not necessarily, they are making the decision, but they're not always the best people to have engaged at all points, because they're not persons, especially when you're doing process mapping or understanding how the process operates in a particular industry or agency, then may not be the best person to engage for a particular section or a particular meeting. So knowing also how to engage them, how to schedule them. And then we go into stakeholder engagement, which includes various methods of doing that. And like I said, we'll go through that in the next slide. And obviously frequent communication, because especially if we are working from an agile-based environment, this is ongoing, this is continuous. So you don't stop engaging them, especially when you're releasing iterations of a value of a product or a service that you're providing to them. So
Tyrhonda, do you mind if we ask questions in between?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so I had a question, almost like a comment. It was about the persons who you get on your side, right? I always call them project champions. They are the ones who, as you go through the project, they are the ones who have the best buy-in. They believe in what you're doing, and they can actually champion the cause to other people. And yes, I can agree with you. I found that they are not necessarily the upper management per se. They're across the company, and they're the ones who are actually going to use it. So for example, the software implementation, the people who get the best benefit of that implementation are your champions. And the best way for you to get everyone engaged and everyone on board is to get those people on board, and they can champion your cause even when you're not in the room. So I definitely agree with that. Your project champions are very beneficial. And I had a question for you.
Okay, sorry.
In terms of the stakeholders, did you find that, I know you said that engaging them early on is important. How much did you need to explain to them, like the process, how you're going to run the project, whether it's waterfall or agile? Did you need to go that deeply, or really did you just engage them on, you know, this is the project, these are the goals, this is what we're trying to accomplish? How deeply did you go with them in the early part?
I appreciate your comment and your question. We engage different people and different stakeholders at different times. So right. For example, and I'll use the same example as the Department of Labor. Of course, you're going to involve and engage the Director of Labor, which is management, really early, because they're the person to kick off the project, to sign off on the project, and to say this project will be actually happening.
Sponsor.
Yes. So once we got to that point, then we were informed of the other members of the team for a particular section. So we realized that engaging the key personnel, the project sponsor, early on is very important. And then we moved on to the different groups of stakeholders, identifying, like you said, a change champion in every agency or every project. You will have somebody who has been waiting forever.
Yes, like finally, yes, it's the truth. Yeah,
so you keep them, you make note of them, and that's why change management is also important as a part of this process. Now, to the second part of your question in reference to we engage them, or do we tell them about if it's project, Agile or waterfall? In the Bahamas, this is still a fairly new concept. So we will say it, but it doesn't to them mean anything. Correct. But what we do is make them aware that it will be released in phases. And that is something that they understand and accept easier. And it also is important for us to make note of that is to manage expectations, because what we find, especially in IT related projects, sometimes they want everything all at once. And you have to manage that process, especially if you're working in an agile based environment, so that when you're delivering value to them in particular phases, they'll understand and agree that, hey, it was agreed that we will create this particular application. However, we'll only have these features at this particular point.
Excellent. Yeah.
So we don't use, we'll loosely use the word agile, but we'll let them know, hey, the approach we take is to release this into phases. In the first phase, we know you're asking for this, and this, but in the first phase, we'll only be able to release this to you. In the next 3 months, you will be able to get it here, this, and this.
Got it. Yeah. And before I let you go on, I can still see your notes. I don't know if you can change this.
Okay, let me
so that we can just see the screen that you're speaking to.
Let me stop
change it. Yeah, change it and let me see.
Okay, let me share it again. And that is because I'm using another tool. Can you see?
That's good. I only see one screen now. It says stakeholder management process. Is that the right one?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. And I'll just talk off the top of my head. Like I said, you like to use the notes just to keep me in line. But engaging the stakeholders, like I said, you use different methodologies. And like I said, this is a fairly new concept for, at least I only can speak in the public service. So we are learning as we go as well on what is the best methodology to do that. And that can include, and I'll go to the next slide, case studies, questionnaires, workshops, any elicitation and or engagement technique or tool. And that also comes with communication, and communication is important in the part of the entire engagement. As you know, most project managers, 90%, maybe 80% of their workload includes communication. So it's important even in a stakeholder management process that is done. So let me go into the next slide. So I think I spoke about this earlier when it comes to identifying and prioritizing / analyzing stakeholders. So this is broken out into 4 different categories, and I'm certain you all already saw this before. So it's the power interest grid, high and low interest, I guess, measurements. So people with high interest and high power or value, you keep them satisfied. High power but low interest, you monitor. Keep informed for the high and low. For low power but high interest, you keep them informed and monitor closely for low interest and low power. So essentially, it's just a method or a matrix to know how to classify and identify these individuals. And in all honesty, we don't lay it out like this, but we keep a stakeholder mapping and we identify those people. And like I think it was Aubrey said, we identify a change champion very early on to keep our work easy and in line with the change manager. And I feel like with stakeholder engagement and management, a change manager is very important in that process as well. So I'll move on. So once again, this is a way in which you can do it. So you can list down the stakeholders and who belong to each group, then assign a point person and craft an action plan for them. and you will lay them out based on, like I said, the same matrix. So with that, I don't know if in different, I guess in different industries, if the project manager, well, obviously the project manager will be the first person to lay this out, but who's going to continually go through that process? I don't know if it varies from industry to industry or organization to organization, but in our agency, what we do is the project manager will do the initial mapping and identification of those point persons. However, the change manager would be the one who would keep these people engaged and informed during the process. And then at each release, the project managers re-engage once again. And I don't know if anybody have any comments or feedback on how you guys do it in your industry or your business, but I would like to hear that as well. But that's what we do here.
Hey, Tyrhonda, I have a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like in your agency that the project manager and the change manager are two different people.
Yes,
So
they
the
are.
project manager doesn't have continuous communication with the stakeholders that's referred to the change manager to ensure that the communications happen. That's what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that they're not actively engaged with the stakeholders. What I'm saying is the change manager is more engaged with keeping those stakeholders either satisfied or reporting to the project manager any issues that they may have encountered or any queries. And at different points, the project manager continue to re-engage those stakeholders. So it's just that the change manager is like the person in the middle between the change manager, is the person in the middle between the project manager and the stakeholders in our agency and that's just because of limitation of resources too, as well. And that's why I asked the question in your business or your organization. I don't know how it works, but I would like to also get feedback at the end or whenever to see how it works with you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so forgive me, I didn't finish put all the icons in, but some of the engagement tools, like I said, includes case modeling, workshop questionnaires, and Scrum meetings. And the Scrum meetings obviously will be done with the Scrum team, and then depends on where we is. If you're doing retrospective, y'all forgive me, I've done my Scrum certification a little while ago, but depends on which Scrum meeting it is, then it will engage different people. With our projects, we do a lot of workshops and questionnaires, but with the questionnaires, we don't provide them the questionnaires to submit to them and then let them send it back. It's still in-person and or a virtual meeting to get clarity on certain items at that point. And that is a continuous process, especially, like I said, if it's a situation where we have to release items in iteration or different groupings. So once again, it's different methods for different groups, but I also would like to hear as well what tools that you guys use in order for you to engage your stakeholders. And let me see if that's it. Yeah, so I think that's it. I am done. I'm so sorry. I know it's 30 minutes, so I'm done with this. I don't know. We would like to open the floor for discussions or questions at this point.
I do have another question, Tyrhonda, but there is a comment in the chat. Stephen Burrows, I don't know if you want to read your comment or speak to your comment that's in the chat.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. It's what I was saying is that you're basically this particular project. You're, like I said, in both gears at the same time. You're dealing with the stakeholders within the organization, and then you're dealing with the stakeholders who are now the people who are utilizing each phase, responding to each phase, commenting about each phase, and then you're having to juggle their reactions, which prompts potential changes in the future, which now you have to engage the stakeholders in-house who you deal with every day and who's going to have to deal with the fallout from those required or requested changes. So it's
Right.
kind of interesting. You're dealing with two different kinds of stakeholder management at the same time.
Yes.
I don't envy you at all.
Thank you. So that's why I identified the internal and external stakeholders. And I did not say this, but with our team, we have developers in-house. But then there's sometimes when you have developers or a vendor that is outside of your organization, so you have to know also how to manage them with those changes. And in a lot of cases too, that's where change requests come in. So like you said, managing those expectations and those people can be very task driven or difficult.
Your communications have to be on point.
Yes, it does. And like I said, it's about 80% of our work is communication and communicating with the right people effectively. And knowing, like I said, even the nuances of those people you're engaging with. So for example, I'll give you another one we did when we launched the e-cabinet system for the Bahamas. Understanding that in some instances, especially if the change is great, you have to also know how to engage those people that may not necessarily want to be a part of that project, because now you're replacing in their mind, their roles or their responsibilities. And so you have the change champions, and then you have those people who are not interested because now you're replacing their jobs. And so understanding those dynamics as well is important in the stakeholder management and engagement process. And it could be very difficult managing those people, especially if those are the same people you have to get information from to make your project a success. So like I said, I would also like to open the floor for anybody to share how it's done in their business. I really would like to hear it. But in this country, and I only can speak from my perspective, especially in the public sector, this is a new dynamic, and engaging the wrong people and incorrectly managing stakeholders can cause you to not fulfill your project timelines, can cause you not meet your scope, and actually deliver something that's not even requested in the first place because you engage the wrong people in the whole process. Yeah. And we've encountered that as well, where you had the wrong people in the meeting, people who are not even doing the work in the meeting. So it's important to know.
Hey, Tyrhonda, you mentioned that you just say you don't go into the details of Agile, and you just tell your stakeholders that you're going to be delivering in a phased approach. Have you confronted or have you been asked of what this phased approach is and how it works? Or do they just accept it as it's a phased approach and don't go into the details of it?
Yeah, we've had people question why they couldn't get all of the items, like if they want all the features requested all at once. Some people ask that question. And then we go into, well, we practice the Agile approach because it will deliver you value quicker. You get some of what you need at a particular point, but you wouldn't have to wait. Or originally you might have had to wait a year in order for you to get this system implemented. But with this approach, you could get some of the key features you needed now and get the other features delivered to you later. And so that is when we get into the methodology. But like I said, once again, when we go into explaining that, they still say, okay, so I'm going to get this, 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 and this. Like, so it's making that connection. Sometimes that is important, not sometimes it is important. And then we realize that they start using the language and the term once we break it down like that for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would guess to get stakeholder, as far as the stakeholders, the people who actually are going to be utilizing the changes, and you know, as you progress the features, each feature, to get them involved is to say we're doing it this way, not only to to let you get some at a time, but to perfect what you end up getting in as an end result. Because as we do this, we get your opinion. We want your opinions so that we can deliver it to you in a better way. By the time it's done, we have a perfected system that everyone is on board with.
I totally agree with that, that approach as well. And what I realized, especially for senior level team members or stakeholders, when you talk about the money, that's when they really pay attention to. So like you said, not only delivering value, but being able to tweak a particular product or system, whatever the project is about, without them incurring any additional cost. They tend to have buy-in with that as well. So you're absolutely correct with that.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
In the same vein, when you utilize that approach for your stakeholders to get them involved in the perfection of the overall product, when you deal with the stakeholders in house with that, you can say, look, the value of any system is the fact that it gets used. If you have a system that gets used, then that's the value that you're looking for, because that means that's efficiency in automation, which takes away the need for personal intervention. And that's cost right there, continuous cost in your pocket.
Right.
So,
and then
yeah, go ahead.
And then two, for the internal stakeholders, let's say, and I'll say internal for us or external stakeholders for the vendors, like you said, if a system is not being used, chances are if the customer did not find value from it, they will not engage you again for any future projects. And
Exactly.
So it's important for them to, and most, I'll say from the other component, and like I say, I operate in a dual role. So let's say we have an external vendor, they find that it works in their favor to say they follow the Agile-based project methodology. When we also look for evaluation of, let's say there's a submission for a bid for an IT-related project, that's one of the criteria as well the government tend to look for with the project-based the approach or methodology. When they see Agile, they are more inclined to working with that vendor versus somebody who follow a waterfall method, because in their mind, they associate that methodology with increased time and increased cost. So from the senior level perspective, and I only can speak, like I say, from the IT side, that the Agile-based approach, they are quite aware of it and they embrace it. But it's just making the other members of the public service aware of what it is and how it could be used and benefit their projects is something that is still being explored.
Yeah. It's like moving from the old Star Trek to the new Star Trek. You don't think it's going to be as good because you're so used to it and they were your friends, but relationships change and you evolve and you grow.
Yes.
Watch it, Stephen Burrows talking about Star Trek. Watch it. Watch it, watch it. So Tyrhonda, I have another question for you about when we were talking about the change manager, right? In my mind, that change manager could become a layer of delay, like a layer, one of the things you try to do as Scrum Masters is remove impediments, right? And so I'm thinking that change manager, if everything has to go through him, so your stakeholders decide, boy, we thought we wanted this way, and yes, it was delivered like that, but boy, we really want to change this. And so they come to the change manager and they outline this change that they really want. Does that change manager become then a bottleneck or a person that creates delay or, shifts in timeline for your deliverables? How does that work in your experience?
No, they don't become, well, at least I only can speak in our experience. They don't become a bottleneck because, like I said, the project manager is still actively engaged. It's just that the change manager is on the ground more often than the project manager, but they're still engaged with the agency. So we keep a line of communication between the stakeholder and the project manager and the change. So, okay, let me give you a real example. If they, let's say I have an agency, they call the change manager, they didn't get a response from the change manager, then they're going to call me. Okay. And in any event, if I know that we are supposed to release a particular product at a particular time, I'm going to keep engaged with the agency and as well as the change manager to find out if there are any issues with the existing features that were delivered so that we'll also address them as well. So like I said, in our agency, it's just a matter of resources. We technically only have 3 project managers for the entire public service. So, and we have over 200 services in terms of what could be onboarded. So it's just a matter of having that resource. But we don't find it as a bottleneck. We actually find them as very good support systems for us, especially, like I said, if there's an issue that is encountered with the current releases, we are informed right away.
I think it depends on the maturity of the organization. Change managers and their process could be potential, I guess, points of delay, but it depends on how strict their process really is.
Yeah.
I've worked with several change managers who are very strict about their process, and in order to get things done, you have to comply with their process. They have created ways to, in a way, circumvent it, but there's still some paper trail that has to be complied with. It's not that you're going to be able to deploy willy-nilly.
Yeah, like you said, it's probably dependent on the organization. Ours is pretty new, so we have the flexibility to not, I wouldn't say comply, but to not be held up by that process. We don't have necessarily a full change management board that has to go through all that process. So that's probably why it makes a difference for us. But once again, I'll be guided by anybody else's experience, but it's not an impediment for us.
Okay. Tyrhonda, question. You mentioned that Agile hasn't been heavily adopted, and then you said that it's being, that at least some organizations are actually looking forward to working with vendors within Agile. Is it that it's a specific sector that's actually knowing that Agile exists and is starting to know about it? Or is it that more people are learning about Agile, more organizations are learning about it and they're little by little starting to implement it? Or lastly, is it just the buzzword bingo?
I'll speak specifically to the first, well, all of it, but in our particular industry, IT, in IT related projects and agencies, it is being adopted and the value of it is being understood. And I think it's because with IT, with our projects in the past, it was issues where they delivered a product and at the end of the year, they did not receive any value for the products or it didn't meet their required needs at an expense. And so they start to understand the value of what Agile can bring for them. I don't know if it's not being introduced and or adopted with other agencies because they don't know how to apply it in projects outside of IT related projects. I don't know if that's the issue, but it's the focus for Agile is in the IT related projects and agencies.
I'm just curious. I know Umar got this all on the wrap, but I'm just curious. Like when you said Agile is being used, are you talking about just the methodology, or is there a particular framework that is being incorporated, and is this being done according to that framework, or is it just a hybrid approach?
Okay, with our organization, they focus on the Scrum, but still have components of hybrid. Depends on management, like who's managing that particular project at that particular time. When I said it's being used, I am talking specifically about internally and externally when it comes to vendor. So what they try to do as best as possible in IT related projects is to source vendors who have, and their team and their project managers who follow the Agile and / Scrum approach to method and our methodology to implementing their projects.
Okay, thanks for that response. But do you know if these agencies who are using Scrum have dedicated product owners, or how is the value of the deliverables determined?
No, and that's the part why I say hybrid and a different component. Because, for example, in our agency, it's more of hybrid than Agile or Scrum, because we don't have a product owner. We don't define them as a product owner. We don't have a Scrum Master. They don't define them as a Scrum Master, but they're still operating in what it is described as a product owner or Scrum Master, which is where we find the issue a lot of times, because they're not identified as a product owner. They're not identified as the Scrum Master, but they're adopting parts of what the methodology is. Now, when it comes to engaging stakeholders outside of the government, that's what they ask you. Do you have a Scrum Master? Do you have a product owner on your team? They ask specifically for those people when it comes to IT related projects. So it's like
Franken Scrum.
I guess if that's how we can describe it. If that's how we could describe it, yes.
Okay.
Oh, I have me killing myself laughing.
Yeah, the problem is what she's mentioning is something that most Agile coaches would identify as a very light implementation of Scrum, to be very specific. And that would be probably their first questions or set of questions of how Scrum was actually implemented. If we're going to go really strict through the Scrum guide, we need the 3 roles. And we know that we have a product owner, we have a Scrum Master, and we have the dev team. And I'm quoting now the 2020 Scrum guide. If you're using a scaled Agile framework, that even adds more depth into what that implementation has to look like. So it's some people call it Franken Scrum, what you're mentioning right now, Tyrhonda. Other people call it Scrum But. So yes, we're using Scrum, but we do this. So it's an interesting case. So it's pretty much, you have the buzzword bingo. Oh yes, we have somebody. Yay, you're a Scrum Master now, whether you know it or not. But it really depends on the implementation and how you get, because the stakeholder management is important. The processes of getting feedback and understanding what the value you're delivering is also important, and seeing it, meaning, and I'm more specifically to what you would have your sprint reviews, where you'd be showing everything off. Even something like we do in our organization to go to stakeholders, we have something that's called story time, and we give them our roadmap of what we're going to be working. It's pretty much a way for us to explain it, but the implementation of Scrum, if you find issues, any Agile coach, I'm willing to bet, will say that it starts with the way it was implemented and what you're doing.
Well, I agree with you, Umar, and that is something we identified as an issue. And like I said, it's a matter of adoption now, and actually implementation of all what it is. So you are totally correct on that.
There is a question from Clayton Travis. It says, any tips on how to better engage business area colleagues of the need for a dedicated product owner to assist the IT development team in building out business area software? I see that it is a major challenge in the government arena here in Florida.
So if I'm guided by the Scrum guide, that's the Scrum Master's role to promote this change, to promote Scrum in the industry or organization you're working in. We have the same issue, like I said. So we don't have a product owner at all. And that's because in my mind too, we don't have a Scrum Master. But if you have that person there to promote the methodology and the whole idea behind it, then you would get better buy-in. I think it's just a matter of people too, like the management team too, being informed and educated on what it is and how it could deliver value for their company and or business. And so we also have that challenge. I'm certain it's not just in the public service, it's throughout the Bahamas for the most part. I tend to look for those roles on LinkedIn, product owner, Scrum Master, and it's very, very few to no roles in asking for those to be fulfilled here. So we do have that challenge as well, unfortunately.
I have another question, Tyrhonda, but I see a raised hand by McLean Travis. You want to ask a question?
Yeah, I asked that question because
Mhm.
I work with an agency now, and historically, I would say going 20, 30 years back, the agency relied heavily on private vendors, the IBMs of the world and Deloitte, and they would just contract out on huge software projects, and they would just turn it over to them. And these vendors would do all of the development, all of the testing, and the business side of the organization, those folks would not come in until user acceptance testing. And that was the way of life for the last couple of decades. But for the last 4 or 5 years, at least with this agency that I'm working with now, they've been transitioning back to developing in-house. And it's been a challenge educating the business partners within the organization. Hey, wait a minute, you need to provide somebody as a product owner. They need to define the vision. They need to be in the mix regularly. They need to be in sprint planning. They need to be communicating daily with our development team. We need folks to test early. We don't want you to wait 2 or 3 weeks toward the end of the sprint for a demo. We want your active participation. The problem with that is all of these people have regular jobs. And it's a constant complaint that I get is that we don't have time for this. So, a lot of times we end up delaying releases because we are dependent on getting answers and things of that nature. So just to make it short, I just thought I'd throw that question out to the group because I feel like things aren't necessarily getting better. I mean, Agile's been around for a while. And you would think just in software development as a whole, you would think it would get better. And I'm seeing it going the other direction. And maybe it's just me and my closed experience with the development teams I've been a part of, but I just thought I'd throw that question out there.
That's an awesome question. I'll be very honest. It happens in a lot of places. You can see it. Think of traditional project management. Let's go with that. Find me one company that actually follows project management to the letter of the T stated as by the PMBOK. You're not going to find one. Everybody has their own in-house version of what product management is to them. And that is commonly seen with Agile as well. You have companies who implement Agile, and what they're doing is they're implementing Agile according to what they understand. They don't bring in an Agile coach. They don't bring somebody who has the experience to say, hey, this is what we need, and this is the reason why. And the Scrum guide is 13 pages long. Hey, I'm a Scrum expert. Let's do it. And there's really more nuance to it than people really consider it. What could I recommend? Take a small group and assign somebody to be the product owner. Literally assign that person and explain what their role is, and use it as an example of why to justify that you need a dedicated product owner for that. Because part of the problems that you are saying are pretty much the reasons why you need a product owner. And also it's symptoms of why a team and things are delayed because of the lack of one. So the recommendation would be take a small team, try to work it out, but unfortunately, everybody has, like you said, has their own full-time job. It has to be somebody who really, first of all, understands everything that you're building, the why you're building, and can answer questions. So you just can't put anybody. You need to put somebody who has knowledge, preferably an SME. And this SME has to know the customer as well, because questions that developers are going to have sometimes are, but could we do this? Could this fill in that gap for the customer? There are technical questions that there will be answered. Maybe the product owner doesn't necessarily have to do it. Maybe he has the technical knowledge to answer those questions. But right now, the best idea is getting a small group and assigning someone who has the sufficient knowledge to act as a product owner. That would be the quick and easy. The other solution, get an Agile coach in there and explain it. And the main reasons why you need an Agile coach, or the Agile one, as some companies call them, it's because they will explain the reasons and probably evidence it due to their experience in other companies of what benefit does that bring. Because if you're going to give them a book, they might not read it. If you're going to give them a PowerPoint, they'll probably be playing on their phone or fiddling or taking notes, just hoping that the time runs by. But if you give them palpable evidence, or if you even show them, hey, this is what a product owner does, that speaks volumes.
And you speaking about a product owner, Omar, brings me to the question I have for Tyrhonda, which is, without a product owner, defining what it is you actually want to deliver and making sure that what it is that you have delivered is what we wanted in the first place. I guess who decides that? Who are the ones who say, okay, yes, I want a car and it needs to be red and it needs to be automatic and it needs to have, a 30-gallon tank, and it needs to have a sunroof. And then once you deliver, the person says, yes, this is it. Who decides that? Is that your sponsor?
Yeah, so it's a combination. So first of all, like I said, BR people operate in the role of product owner, similar to with the Mr. Travis McLean acts. So they're not dedicated. So in that particular, we have an ICT manager who is responsible for, with the devs team, releasing these features to the agency. We also have business analyst who is responsible for getting the requirements, engaging the stakeholders as well from that perspective, documenting their requirements, and from there, the developers choose the items in which, as well as the business process, re-engineer which products they're going to release to that agency. Once that is done and agreed upon in terms of a demo being built out and a demo is being performed, then the agency says, yes, we agree, this is what it is. They sign off and move along smartly. So we do UAT and all of that as well, but it's a combination of individuals. Ultimately, though, the agency or the sponsor for that agency is the ultimate person who signs off and say, this is what we wanted, this is what you delivered, and we are satisfied.
How strict are you in terms of, I think that you said that you do phases. I don't know if they're like the typical 2-week sprints, your phases. But how strict are you in terms of, you gave me a set of features that you wanted and we delivered the features that you said you wanted. How strict are you in terms of not changing or not, whatever the change manager may come to you with? How strict are you in terms of actually making adjustments to respond to those changes? Or do you say, the sprint is finished, we delivered what you asked for, try and stick that in the next one? How strict are you in terms of that?
Well, with the internal development team, it's a little more less restrictive. And so if it's a feature that they can build in within that 2-week sprint, then they will do that. However, in cases with an external vendor, then of course, it's a little bit more restrictive because first of all, if it's already signed and agreed, then we may encounter costs, change costs and issues along those lines. So internally, it's a little bit more flexible, where as long as the system can be able to accommodate the request, then they can make adjustments within that period. If not, if it's a little bit more complex, then it will be released in the other release, which is every month in our instance. Because it's so many services, we literally have a 3-member development team. So, yeah.
We have an interesting question that Blanche just posted in the chat. But Blanche, if you don't mind, please come off mute and bring this to the team. I think this is interesting, what you're asking.
Okay, well, what it is like I said, I did my master's degree in hospitality and tourism management. I know one of the big issues in the Caribbean, at least I used to live in the Virgin Islands. So that's kind of why I'm really like this group, because it's Caribbean people and the people who have that, experience of the Caribbean. So what it is I know that one of the big issues is that we have in the Caribbean is a lot of the times the managers that are hired to work for the hospitality properties are not, necessarily from the Caribbean. They're either coming in from the US or Europe or wherever. So when they come in and they encounter Caribbean employees, they don't understand what's deviance versus what's culture. So basically, I created a system to kind of get them acclimated to what's culture versus what's actual deviant behavior. And it's based on my academic research, but that's neither here nor there. But what I want to do is use Agile kind of in a setting to do something like, because I haven't done my main rollout yet. I'm working with an instructional designer. But once I start to facilitate it to, I'm thinking for stakeholder management to run like focus groups as sprints, like get beta testers and maybe do like, there's 4 modules, so do a 1-week sprint with each module just to get that feedback from real managers, and basically find out what they like about it, what they don't like, what could change, what can't change, because I really want it to be something that's going to really make an impact in, delivering something to the market, not just, putting it out there for my ego. So from a Scrum and Alliance Agile perspective, what advice would you give me for, engaging the stakeholders as far as, I know you talked about case studies and focus groups and that type of thing. What would be the best approach?
See, stakeholder management doesn't have anything to do with Agile. That is totally separate from Agile. It's something that has to be done, but it really doesn't tie one-to-one with Agile. It's just it's part of it's something that is needed, but it's part of the processes that are actually outside that need to happen before you go into a Scrum process. Now, for what I could do for getting those focus groups or trying to get in front of people, I wouldn't even recommend you get Scrum or use Scrum. I would recommend Kanban for that, because tying focus groups to sprints doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the amount of people that you want. Within Kanban, you can create, think of it as a user story. You could create that for Kanban as well and take the time that you need. Now, once you get those changes, then you can start using a Scrum process, because then you can break down that feedback and break it down into stories so that you can make the necessary changes. But right now, it would, your case is very interesting, but for beta testers, again,
Kanban.
I would go for a Kanban, because you need to get them, and then you have to have them really try to break the product, because that's their role. Anybody in QA anybody who says otherwise is just wrong. The QA's role is to break your product and expose any deficiencies.
And that's what I really want. I want people who are not going to be scared to say, this isn't realistic, because you're bringing people into a place where they know nothing about it. So the whole goal is, giving them that advantage, their learning curve, so that they're not making all these like cultural mistakes and, saying the wrong things and doing the wrong things. Because, once an employee checks out, they're either going to quit or they're going to, start stealing or doing something else deviant to revenge against the business. So that's trying to find out from these people, by the end of this course, are you learning enough that you feel comfortable now going into that setting as a new manager and feeling that you can relate more to these employees versus if you hadn't done this training?
That is a great idea. Now, when you say Caribbean, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, what area of the Caribbean are you actually speaking about? Because I'm in Puerto Rico, and it doesn't get more Caribbean than that. You know, we have many islands in the Caribbean. So are you focused on one specific set of islands or one specific area, or your idea is to start in one point and then expand to the rest?
Pues yo hablo español también. I'm from Puerto Rico. You know,
¿En qué parte?
Yo soy de Carolina, pero.
Ah, bendito, vamos allá.
Yeah, we're gonna talk some more, Omar. But no, what the whole idea was, like, I went to University of Central Florida, Roseland, and I literally spent 3 years because I grew up in the Virgin Islands. So really, it was just a lot of the things that I experienced growing up are still problems 40 years later. So basically, trying to attempt to deconstruct some of these things that, you know, why haven't we progressed? So basically, from human resources perspective, from marketing perspective, from, you know, what are those cultural barriers? So basically, I spent 3.5 years basically creating everything from crime and hospitality to whatever. So now I have all these research projects, and what I want to do is take them and actually bring them to life. And I think that Agile is going to be a way where I could do that, because now it gives me a way of taking that larger research and breaking it down into more manageable pieces that managers can actually understand and actually feel like they can, you know, understand, not from an academic research perspective, but from real life scenarios. If you do this, this is going to help you to save money because, you know, and kind of framing it as stories.
Okay. Your case is very interesting, and obviously I'm intrigued and would like to hear more about it. So I'm going to be posting our LinkedIn profile so you can connect with any of us and we can definitely help you out and converse more about it, because you caught my attention. And obviously we both speak Spanish, so podemos hablar en español también. I have no issues with that. And yeah, that I like your idea. That's something I haven't heard of doing, and I'm very intrigued.
I have one more question, Tyrhonda. I was leaving the floor open for others to ask questions, but my question is about your stakeholders. Obviously, they come from different parts of the organization or whichever sector that you're working on for whatever it is that you're trying to implement. Have you found that there's a challenge getting them to prioritize what you need them to do, either in terms of providing feedback, providing responses, doing the UAT, the user acceptance testing? Because everybody, of course, has their own full-time job and their own priorities for other persons. How have you found balancing that prioritization as it relates to your project or your deliverables with the stakeholders?
Yeah, so it is sometimes a challenge with those agencies and or representative stakeholders from those agencies to get them to prioritize, because like you said, especially if you're dealing with high level stakeholders, meaning that they have other obligations, sometimes will be the minister of a particular industry or agency, right? So it is an issue. However, what we do realize too depends on, I don't want to say it incorrectly, but let's say depends on the reason for the project being initiated or launched. Then they reorganize their priority. And then you also need to learn, and this will happen through the engagement process, what is the best approach to engage them. So some people prefer in-person meetings, and if that's the best way for you to get them to answer questions or get them to provide you whatever you need to get, that's the method we use. Some people, because of location, as you know, we are an archipelagic nation, we can't always necessarily go to Eleuthera or whatever, then it will have to be a virtual meeting. So we do have that challenge, but we try to find different methods to get as much as possible as what we need from those people.
But you don't get an opportunity to have dedicated persons for the most part, right?
Not always.
Essentially working with persons who are doing their day-to-day and whatever it is they do, and they pretty much drop what they're doing or they stop what they're doing to assist you when needed. It's never a dedicated person. I shouldn't say never, but it's not usually.
Yeah, they identify somebody as a dedicated person, but usually they're not as dedicated as. But what we also realize too is at sometimes, say for example, a director of, let's say the director of labor, he has an assistant director, and we, even though they may not have officially recognized that person as a stakeholder, we unofficially recognize that this is the person we could get this information from. So we also find those persons as well that may have not necessarily been originally identified, but is a resource for us to get what it is that we need.
Okay.
So before we continue with any more questions or any more other real world examples, which have been great so far, I'm going to ask if everybody can indulge me real quick and turn on your camera so we can take a picture and post this in our LinkedIn page. It'll be quick and painless, trust me. Here, okay. Thanks everyone. Now smile, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it. Okay, so any more questions for Tyrhonda? Any more situations or that you guys would want to discuss? Again, thank you for coming. Please spread the word. Keep bringing people our way. We love to keep having people coming back, and we love to keep helping everybody we can. Like I said, I posted our LinkedIn profiles. If you want to connect with us, please do so. We are willing to help. We will answer every question we have received, whether it be Andrea, Sophia, Tyrhonda, or myself, we do answer. So please feel free to just message us. And if you need to have a much deeper conversation, I will provide you my personal information through LinkedIn so that we can contact and have a separate session. So Tyrhonda, from the stakeholder management, like you said, pretty much we have the same issues that we would have in any project or product. We still have the same. What, from all the stakeholders that you've managed, what has been, I think, the challenge that you have had to really fight against, that you have even gone beyond the steps that you presented today?
I think the biggest challenge is when there is internal non-spoken issues in the organization and or business that you're working with. When there are internal issues, that is a problem, and oftentimes you are not aware until midway between the project that there's grievances with maybe the staff and upper management, and because of that you get resistance, and you're trying to, as best as possible, retrieve information that could deliver value, like I said before, but you're getting pushback. And understanding those dynamics and understanding how to appeal and appease those individuals, and understanding the dynamics in a way that you don't disrespect one person over the other, usually is a challenge. And that's something that we encounter very frequently, but communication is key. It also requires you to develop some level of relationship with the stakeholders that you're working with, and to get them to trust not only that you're delivering a product or value to them, but you also have a vested interest in them. And that is often a challenge when you're trying to meet a particular deadline as well. So for me, that wasn't included, but that is the most challenging part.
So essentially, this project sounds good, but who wants this? Omar, I don't like
Nobody-
Omar, so I'm not gonna help you. Is that it? I don't like
That's-
Omar. I don't care how good this project is going to be. I'm not going to help you.
Exactly,
So basically, that's it. Oh, okay.
exactly it.
All right.
Exactly
Okay. Understood.
it.
It's
Mhm.
true though.
Mhm.
People let personal feelings or who wants it get in the way of the benefit to the organization. So I can agree with you. As a project manager, it's not just communication. It's also that empathy portion of it, right? Is trying to get to the root of how can I get this person to understand that even though you don't like Omar, there's a bigger goal here, as opposed to just focusing on what their personal issue may be with the project. So I can understand that. It's a challenge. You're a psychologist as well. I know.
And as project managers, you tend to be everything to everybody, and that's very difficult.
To get things done. Agreed. Because at the end of the day, people are people. And, people, it would be great if people focused on the goals and objectives and just, focused on the work. But it doesn't always happen. And there are a few that make it more challenging. But I also think that those persons add value in a way that you may not think about. They may bring things to the table that others who are quiet may not. So they also highlight some areas of concern that, you can focus on. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Never a dull moment.
Okay, now for those who are part of Scrum Alliance, I am posting in the chat the link for you to claim your SEUs. Just in case, a quick reminder, SEUs are the points that you need in order to renew your certifications with Scrum Alliance. So I am posting that link right there. Again, if nobody has any more questions, we do thank you for joining. Hope to see you all back again. Tyrhonda, we do expect you to also see you again and come, if not as a speaker, as a part of and member of this team. And thanks again for speaking with all of us today.
Absolutely, and thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor.
Thank you. Well, everybody, I will give you back 12 minutes back of your time so you can, I don't know, walk the dog, get some grub, or just hang out and start watching TV early. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for joining, everyone. And we hope to see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.